all of our staff because of the closing process, and we just need people to physically be on site to process closings. But we have put into place some protocols to try to make being in the office safe for us and for the clients who are coming in and out. So, for example, some of the recommendations of the stay-at-home orders, there's Robby, we are taking the temperatures of all employees who come into the office before they come into the office. We've got a infrared, digital thermometer to take temperatures to make sure, we're protecting that. We have extreme cleaning protocols that we go through in the morning, which includes the reception area and the conference rooms and our kitchen area. And so in between each closing, we have about a 5 or 10 minute cleaning session where we wipe down everything, chairs, table, doorknobs, everything that could possibly be touched. We sterilize in between each closing. I think we've shared our written protocols with most of the agents who have come into a closing. We really strongly discourage anyone from attending the closing in person that doesn't need to. So, obviously the buyers / borrowers, most of the time, if there's a loan, need to be there. But we, encourage the realtors, representatives from the lenders, et cetera, to not come unless, they feel like it's absolutely necessary. You can always Skype or otherwise, be present, video or by phone. Happy to have that, but we're really trying to comply with social distancing recommendations. And so we're just trying to keep as many people out of the office as possible, and especially out of the conference room. So in addition to that, we have the Purell everywhere. We have gloves available for anyone. And we wear masks. And we have one of our builder clients constructed a plexiglass frame that sits on the conference room table in between the closing attorney and the borrowers, and it has a slot underneath where we slide papers back and forth. So, and that seems to give people a certain level of comfort. I know it's not perfect, but we're trying to do everything that we can to make it a safe and efficient experience. We're also trying to make sure that the borrowers have access to as much of their documents ahead of time so that they can review them and spend less time out in public, with questions or trying to digest the documents, so that the time that they come in and out of the office is as efficient as possible. Of course, with when we have cash closings, we're often no one comes. Money will be wired in. Closing statements can be DocuSigned, and there's no need for anyone to actually leave their home to do that. Robby will talk, I'm sure, about some of the challenges and perhaps solutions that we can look forward to in the loan execution document. We get asked a lot about why can't I sign my loan documents electronically. The buyers have come to expect they go all the way through the beginning, from listing agreement or buyer agency agreement to contract, to loan application, everything can be done online. And then they get to the closing process and it can't be done online. And, that's something that the lending industry has been working on for a very long time. E-closings will be a reality. I think after what we are going through now, that process will probably be sooner than it may have before. We've made progress in there. We're just not there yet. I think only 10% of lenders out there actually have the capability to do e-closings. I can't swear to that percentage, but that's what I've been told. And one of the roadblocks that we have in North Carolina has to do with our particular notarization statute. And you may have heard this or you may not. North Carolina, like all 50 states, has an e-notarization statute, and there are e-notaries. I have 3 e-notaries on my staff. The issue is that in North Carolina, and North Carolina is one of the few states like this, our e-notarization law still requires the e-notary to be physically present with the person signing the document that will then be e-notarized. And so that sort of makes that, removes that as a good solution for, the stay-at-home order and having to sign documents that need to be notarized. Just finish up real quickly. There is legislation in Washington, and there is legislation that has been put forward in North Carolina legislature to temporarily, remove that physical presence requirement from the notary process during this pandemic. It would allow an attorney notary to watch the signature over real-time video, check the identification over the video, then the original documents and a copy of that identification would be overnighted to the attorney, and then I could apply a real notarization to it and we could finish up the deal. However, the state legislature is not in session and they haven't seen fit to come back in session to deal with that proposed legislation. So that's just kind of hanging out there. We hope that perhaps that'll be a solution, but it's not helping us yet. So that is sort of in a nutshell how we've tried to adapt our process to continue to make closings possible and as safe as we can.
Super, thank you, Tom. Robby, you want to talk a little bit about it from the mortgage side?
So on the mortgage side, not a lot has changed. Like Tom said, almost everything was done digitally anyway, except for the physical signing. The big change has been the appraisals, which we have had a lot of good success with that, having exterior only appraisals. Obviously, the first thing that happens there is if the appraisal misses, everybody starts then blaming that the appraiser didn't go inside, and that's the issue we have with that. But really, that's the only change. We are getting people that are frustrated, like Tom said. I mean, everything that Tom said basically has everything that I have to cover about electronic closings and how North Carolina does require notary. The only difference that I would add is that we are, for people that are doing mail-aways, if they're out of state and don't want to travel and still want to close, they're doing what's called a drive-in notary, where we do a mail-away for the closing. They find a notary that will watch them sign the documents while they sit in the car, and then they will then hand the documents over to the notary to be notarized and then FedExed out. So that's really the only change. But there are only a handful of documents that need to be signed by the borrower, but unfortunately there's no other option. Luckily, we do have the option on all refinance transactions and purchase transactions that are refinances that are not cash out, that the attorney can provide the power of attorney for the borrower. So it truly can be a no contact closing if people want it to be, if they're willing to allow their attorney to have power of attorney for them.
Allan Nielson from TMLS, what's happening from the TMLS side that we need to be aware of, and what are you seeing in the market?
Yeah, so obviously times are a little bit different for us as well, and from a staff point of view, we decided to basically close the physical building. So we have no staff sitting in our building on Realtors Way these days. So everybody's working remotely, and we've been fortunate that it turned out we were actually quite well prepared for making that move. Everybody have been able to just basically move their office home. So we really have had no downtime in terms of not being able to provide services or anything like that. So we are fully up and running, and that goes for training as well. We are doing just as much training as we used to, and I know for you guys, I believe Lynn is having a training session with you guys later this afternoon, or for OCHAR. So yeah, no, so we are full speed ahead. So some of the changes that we have made that you guys can feel, and certainly a lot of this is driven by a lot of the questions that we are getting, and I'll cover some of those here. But the main things that has occurred is that showing time has opened up functionality, so agents can, so it basically now supports virtual showings, and they've provided some nice instructional videos on how to go about that. Last week they also added the option for a showing agent to request a virtual showing from the listing agent. So showing time was out very early and acted very quickly to these changes. So that is already up and running now. The big discussion that we have had has been about open houses. How do we conduct open houses during these times? And one challenge that we have had is not every county has the same orders, right? In Wake County, you can do showings. I believe you guys in your counties, unless I'm mistaken, can do physical showings, but you have to just be careful, obviously, where in others you can't, right? So as an MLS that covers 16 counties in total, how do we change to accommodate some of these things? So what we have done so far is that we have not limited any kind of showings or open houses, but we have added the ability to schedule streaming open houses. So Paragon is now supporting that, and there's fields for that made available. It's interesting to see how people, and I think this is more something that we're all still learning what streaming means and what live means and that kind of stuff, because we saw that the majority of so-called streaming open houses that was uploaded was actually just a virtual chore, so a recorded kind of open house, and that is not what was the intent, and it's not what I think showing agents are expecting, or agents and buyers are expecting. So a limitation was implemented. So there's a white list of providers of these open houses or streaming services that are allowed now. So virtual chores should not be entered as open houses. In terms of our rules, we didn't make too many changes to the rules, but we did relax one rule that we have, and we did this early on, and that is the rule that says that you can block showings on active listings for no more than 48 hours, meaning that if you can't take showings for more than 48 hours, you will have to change the status to no showings. So we relaxed that rule. So now, in order to kind of still maximize the exposure of your listing, you can leave it active and then block showings kind of indefinitely until further notice anyway, through showing time, and also by leaving a note in the remarks field, the public remarks field, that says the showings are not available at this time. Again, that will allow that the listing is still being included in the various marketing feeds to realtor.com, and all the websites we have through List Hub, and of course broker websites as well. So that was, we went out pretty quick to make that change. Not that many agents have taken advantage of it, because the downside, of course, to leave a listing active is that it will accrue days on market. And that's another question we have had, or we have heard many times, is will the MLS do anything to days on market? And the answer is no. We will not manipulate data during these times. We find it to be absolutely crucial that when this is all over, that we have data to look back on and see what was the true effect of this. And so that's why we are not touching days on market. If your listing is in the active status, it will accrue days on market. If days on market is an issue for the sellers, then we have no showings that can be used for that purpose. So those are kind of the changes that we implemented here. Another thing we're doing, just because, again, going back to open houses really quick, because open houses is such a hot issue, kind of, we're currently working on a reminder that will go out to agents that are scheduling in-person open houses. It's going to be just a simple reminder that they should be aware of local directives in terms of in-person showings. Those are the things we have done from an MLS point of view. And like I said, we're still very much open for business, and are here to support all the agents the best that we can. Thank you.
Super. We're going to open it up to some questions here, and if you raise your hand, I think we can unmute you. We'll try to keep an eye on who's asking the question. I just wanted to share some quick data that I pulled up before the meeting today, just comparing the first 2 weeks of April this year compared to the first 2 weeks of April last year, April 1st through April 15th. In Orange County last year, the first 15 days of April, there were 164 listings taken. This year, there were only 86. In Chatham County, there were 75 listings taken last year during the first 15 days. This year, there was only 44. And on TMLS as a whole, last year, 2,552 listings during the first 2 weeks, but 1,862 listings this year. So everything is dropping off a little bit, but the pendings, in Chatham County, there's still 567 pending sales. In Orange County, there's 639 pending sales. So there's still lots of real estate business going on. And the real interesting thing of the 86 listings that were taken the first 2 weeks of the month, 44 of them already sold in Chatham County, and in Orange County, it was about right at about 50% of those sold were under contract during that 2 week period of time. So there are people in the market listing, and there are people buying. So let's open it up to questions from our membership, and I'll pose the first one, which I just saw come from Jessica Bryant to Allan. If you go to a no showing status, does that stop the days on the market clock?
Yeah, so if days on market only accrues when the listing is in the active status. Any other status, days on market will pause. Of course, you cannot show the home while it's in that status, of course, but yeah, days on market will pause.
Other questions out there? Carl Johnson, who do you have?
Yes, I have a question.
Okay.
Hi, Allan. Good to see you again. Thank you for taking time to talk to us all today. I have a new listing coming up tomorrow in downtown Durham. So you could probably already forecast my question. I am an open house guy, and I love open houses. So I have been strategizing, trying to figure out within the current guidelines what is acceptable for me to do. And what I've come up with is a Facebook live virtual showing where I will present a link, hopefully, or a name of the business page, present that on the Facebook information field where I list the actual date and time of the event in MLS. And then I would have that from 1 to 2 on Saturday. From 2 o'clock till 3 o'clock, I have a Zoom live virtual showing, staying away from the words open house, as they are deemed not acceptable at this time by our mayor, because we're kind of shut down over here.
So your question specifically is related.
Can I put that text in the open house field in MLS, please, so that I can at least get some people that the only way they can see this house, since they can't even do a showing, the only way they can see this house, since I'm taking the time to be there, is to join a virtual event with me, which I'm calling a virtual showing. And I need to promote the link in MLS so it goes into the all of the other syndication, so that it goes to the Zillows and Realtor.coms of the world.
Yeah, so most of our vendors have been made aware that we have these new open house fields, right? So we have a new field under open houses that can take a URL. And again, like I mentioned earlier, assuming that that is to a live streaming event of sorts, then that field is used appropriately. So there should be no issue in doing that. If your concern is whether or not that link is going to be showing up in different places, for now, we will allow you to kind of include that in the remarks temporarily, just to ensure that it is being syndicated out. The remarks field is one of those that will be syndicated. So as long as if you schedule it as an open house event, it should be a live stream, and I think that's what you said that you were doing.
Okay, super. Moving on to a next question, I and a couple questions for Robby.
I had one follow-up question to that, Pat. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
What Allan said, because I was joined into the panel here. So to clarify, if I may, please, Allan, what I'm hearing you say is I can put the link to my Facebook page where the actual live event will be starting at 1 o'clock on Saturday, but I'll be posting that Friday so that the data is actually in the system. It won't be a direct link to the actual video, which will be a live feed starting at 1 o'clock. It'll actually be a link that goes to my Facebook page, which is a business page. But that's the only way that I know of to actually put a link out there for somebody to join a Facebook Live event. So
yeah, and
I just want to be specific about that, because you said just as long as it says a link directly to the video, Facebook Live does not allow us to do that. I don't know of a way to do that.
Yeah, so we will be flexible on that for the time being. This is also new to both you guys and also new to us. And it was important for us that we were able to give you the opportunity to continue to conduct as much business as possible. So you can include a link to your Facebook where that live event will take place. I don't know if you're going to run into an issue with the system seeing that is not to a live event. That may be the case. And if that's the case, then I would recommend that you switch this over to and I understand the power of a Facebook Live event. I understand the advantages of that. But otherwise, if it won't take that link, you may have to do the open house as a Zoom type event instead. But see if it will accept it. We're not going to, if the system will take the link, we're not going to come back and tell you can't do it. Not yet anyway. We haven't really had time to really look at how to control that field otherwise, the open house field, that is.
Super. Saw a couple of questions coming in for Robby. I'll try to see if I can kind of summarize a couple of things that came up, Robby. It looks like, or we've been hearing about changes in required credit scores. We saw that some of the big banks were saying that they were going to only be doing 80% loans and higher credits. Are you seeing any of that? Are you seeing changes in requirements from your investors? What do you think?
So the answer is yes, we are seeing some of it. I would caution people in what they're, what I'm seeing is it's just like everything else that you see. Now the news is falling into real estate is, one bank, which was a major bank, required 20% down on, conventional loans of 700, but that's one bank that did that, and the media just took it and ran like crazy with it. Now, will other banks follow suit? Maybe, but this bank did the same thing in 08, and then they came back into the market. So, we are seeing some tightening of guidelines. I don't think that it will affect a ton of our buyers. I'm very optimistic. I saw the question from Christine come across about what the numbers are for loan applications. And, I don't have those actual numbers right now, but I can tell you that volume is up substantially in the first quarter of the year versus the first quarter of last year, and it hasn't really slowed down. I mean, what we've seen, the same thing with your number of actives and pendings, is the people that are getting pre-approved are buying. There's not as many people that are getting pre-approved. I will say that. Eventually that's got to come down the pipeline if there's not pent-up demand there. But the people that come through every week, if they're getting 100%, I mean, if they come in, they're buying. And so we're still seeing tons and tons of activity. Actually, it picked up this week from last week as far as pre-approvals and contracts. So I think that from that standpoint, to go back to your question about credit scores, I mean, I've heard the media's picked up all over that you have to have a 680 to buy a house. I know that CIMG still has investors that'll do to 660. Again, we don't see a ton of that in our marketplace. The one thing that I would just advise people is at CIMG, we've been through the dot-com bust, we've been through 9/11, we've been through 08. I mean, we've seen all of this before. And what I can tell is that this is much different than 08 from the standpoint that we're getting help from the Fed much earlier than we did in 08. So you have to be extremely optimistic on that. Now, the one concern for the marketplace we are seeing is the jumbo lenders are all following Wells Fargo's move and kind of limiting jumbos. We still have jumbos. The rates are not as attractive as the traditional conforming loans, but they are out there. And overall, I'm extremely optimistic about how everything's being handled in the mortgage marketplace. But I can only speak to how CIMG is handling it. I can't speak to all the other companies that have been started post 2008.
Okay. Who else has got questions out there, Cub? I'm having a hard time seeing them.
I'm going to catch you up. So we've got a question here for Allan. And this is from Peter Winkler. He says they're having trouble, difficult time sharing video walkthroughs. The videos are hosted on Vimeo, but they haven't responded to us regarding unbranded links. We understand it's possible to put the link in agent and syndication, but still have no luck with the link that meets TMLS guidelines. Any advice?
Yeah, so, and that is a question we get frequently. And yes, we certainly have rules in place that will prevent videos to be shared on services that displays any kind of advertisement. So that's why YouTube won't work for virtual tours. Facebook will not work for virtual tours. Again, I'm not talking about open houses here, just recorded virtual tours. Vimeo is actually an option, but it will require I think it's called a pro account. So I do know Vimeo charges for that, but with a pro account, you can generate a link that when the viewer clicks on it, they will be locked into the video and cannot click out of it. And there's no Vimeo branding or any kind of branding on the hosting site in that situation. So Vimeo, like I said, they do have an option to do this, but it requires a pro account. I'm not sure what the cost for that pro account is. I do not believe it's very much, but that is probably the easiest way to go about getting a link that is in compliance.
Awesome, thanks, Allan. All right, this question's for Robby. It says, at what point during the loan process can a lender change the requirements, specifically perhaps changing from a loan with a 5 or 10% down to requiring 20%? Buyers that are already under contract for new construction and did not have access to a COVID-19 addendum at the time are potentially going to get caught up in this scenario.
The answer is at any point can that be changed. I know I've taken in at least 3 or 4 loans where other lenders have changed the program or flat run out of money, because that is an issue out there right now with margin calls. So, that can be changed at any time. However, really the only thing that I would be concerned about right now is if it is a very large jumbo loan that's on new construction, say, out a couple months, but hopefully we'll be through all the couple months, or someone with a credit score below 650. Other than that, I don't think you're going to see a lot of changes. You're seeing companies, individual companies struggle with loans and decline loans, but as a industry as a whole, I don't see a lot of concern with guidelines like that changing.
And one more.
Saw a couple of questions for Tom about his terminations. Are you seeing that COVID-19 addendum used much? Any questions or any concerns about some of the terminations, Tom?
Well, the COVID-19 addendum is so recent. I mean, I've seen it, but I haven't actually seen it be used yet to extend a closing date. The terminations that we're seeing, first of all, I'm not the best resource for the reasons, because on most terminations, all I get is buyers exercise their right to terminate, stop all work. So, but my sense is that, buyers who are terminating are, there's a little bit higher anxiety level overall that they're dealing with. I think they are in a position to be a little more discerning about things because of that heightened anxiety level, and where they might roll with something in the past, maybe they just aren't going to roll with it with everything else that's going on. That's, just from my perspective, what I'm seeing. But, the rates are so good right now that, I think that's keeping a lot of people in the market and in the game. I've seen a couple of actually is seller terminations that were interesting, where a seller doesn't want to relocate, you know, due to COVID-19 related issues, but without a COVID-19 addendum, which is interesting. So there's some, perhaps not rational decision making, but it's out there nonetheless.
All right, Pat, so we have another one.
Properties go right back under contract that have been terminated.
Okay.
So we have another question for Tom, and this comes from another member. It says, do we know when the courts will reopen for eviction filing? Also, if we need to file an eviction that does not relate to paying rent, how do we do so?
So I don't do a lot of landlord-tenant work. And so, but I think it's a little, and it would be hard to predict, how long the moratoriums on evictions could be extended. I think like everything else with this, whether it comes to business closings or school closings, we'll know more in 2 weeks than we know now, and that's about all we can predict.
All right. Any other questions out there?
There's another one I see sitting. It says, are the majority of the terminations coming within the due diligence period?
Is that a question to me?
Yes.
Yes, they are.
Okay. Allan, are you seeing lots of use of the April 1st, we had that coming soon category that became effective that allowed you to have a property? I believe it becomes available then for the IDX feeds and it's just not available for showing. Are you seeing that category being used a lot, or you had questions about that, or how's that going?
Yeah, so yeah, we introduced 2 changes on April 1st, and one was the coming soon, the addition of the coming soon status. Coming soon in itself is nothing new in our market or our MLS, but we created a status specifically for it, and then we limited the amount of time a listing can be in that status to 30 days. Yeah, it's being used, and I think the last time I checked, we had about 400 MLS-wide coming soon listings. The majority of those obviously were just transferred from the previous coming soon setting that we had. But yeah, no, it's being used, and yeah, nothing, not much more to say about the status itself. You're right, that is being syndicated to IDX feeds, and we still have every now and then still we hear agents complaining that the listing was displayed as active on a particular website, and when we get those, we simply reach out to the IDX vendor and have them correct that. So, but for the most part, we're doing well there. And then just real quick, the other change that we had was limiting the listing entry deadline to 1 business day. So if you have a new listing, you have only 1 business day now from the entry date.
Okay, as a follow-up to that, as I saw a question out there, when they're in the coming soon category, are the days on the market counted?
Yeah, so days on market still does only accrue when the listing is in the active status. We have not really discussed whether or not it is reasonable to count them while they are in the coming soon status. So for now, they do not. Of course, one could argue, well, if they're syndicated out to broker websites and otherwise marketed, then maybe it should accrue. But at this point in time, we are limiting it to active listings.
Okay, and then the follow-up question, if I understand one of the questions that was out there, was if somebody has an active listing, but the seller has asked that it not be shown or is limited showing, and we're blocking that way through showing time, those days still accrue if that's done through showing time.
Yeah, just real quick, just to some clarification on that in general. So what we did was we allow agents now and sellers to block showings on their otherwise active listings without changing the status in the MLS. So you can have an active listing in the MLS where showings has been blocked in showing time. We do require that the agent adds a comment in the public remarks that says no showings at this time or something similar. But again, because it is active, days on market will accrue.
Okay, and one last question. If someone wants to put their home in that category, house was on the market, and they don't want it shown, can they put it into a coming soon category, or is that not allowed?
That is not only not allowed, it is not possible.
Okay.
So, coming soon can only be used as the initial status of a listing, and we have already turned a few people away that wanted to move it to coming soon. We can't do it.
Okay. Cub, are you seeing other questions out there? Other people who have questions?
I am checking, and I am not seeing anything in the Q&A portal. So
I have a question. This is Carl. I can't put a question in since I'm on the panel now. May I ask a question to Allan, please?
Yes.
Thank you. Hi, Allan. It's me again. So I am trying to get out all of my usual marketing for this listing on Friday. So here's a question for you. Is it possible for me to put in documents, or preferably in photos, in MLS, like a flyer with some words and pictures about the property, specifically also a map of the location and drivability and walkability of the location, things of that nature?
Yes, absolutely, you can do that. The only thing you cannot do, and I'm talking only about the media part, not documents, but the media part, you cannot have any contact information or promotional messages on that media, whether it's a photo or video, whatever it is. You just can't have any promotional messages. You can't have anything that can lead a potential buyer to you as the listing agent in those things. In terms of documents, because the documents are not directly shared with potential buyers, they can only be shared through their agent. We do not have any limitations on what you can have in the document section.
A couple other
out there from Larry at due diligence dates, and wanted to answer that. You know, we're actually seeing that those turn times are quicker because we have exterior only appraisals now. So that's actually tremendously that speeds up the process for us. Most of our delays and due diligence is all appraisal related. So I mean, I think, you know, right now we're seeing 3 weeks, which has kind of become our standard due diligence date at CIMG, is perfectly fine. And then I think Brett had an additional question out there that I wanted to ask. Other things that we're seeing affecting the loan process, you know, basically it is important to note that if the buyer is furloughed, then right now, as far as we understand it, they do have to wait until they regain their employment back, so that we only have one instance of a hairdresser right now trying to buy a house, and that has been suspended until you can restart work. So, you know, a couple things that you are seeing out there that are affecting the home buying process. I would just encourage the person that was furloughed. They didn't tell us until, you know, the day before. Luckily, we found a way around that the day before closing. But if you, as a realtor, find out that your customer is talking to you about being furloughed, make sure they are telling their lender, because a lot of times people think, well, I'm still employed, what's the big deal? But there are Fannie and Freddie guidelines for furloughs right now.
Another follow-up question to that, Robby. Are you having difficulty with all these businesses that are gone remote getting verifications of employment?
Actually, those guidelines have been relaxed, so no, not
Okay.
really. I did see the follow-up to Brett's question about self-employed. You know, self-employed people just have to make a statement that says that their income is not affected by COVID, which is, in my opinion, is very open-ended, because who hasn't been affected by COVID? But a lot of these short-term regulations come out in our industry. They don't put a lot of thought through, you know, what they're asking for. But generally, that's it. If you're self-employed, we just need a statement saying that you're still making money and operating a business as usual. So obviously, restaurateurs, hairdressers, that sort of thing, those would be people that would have trouble closing. But other than that, right now, we're seeing high level of success.
Okay. I'd love to pose some questions out there for our participants in terms of what are you seeing showing property? Are you doing lots of virtual showings, FaceTime showings? Are you seeing a reduction in the amount of actual homes you show? I have heard anecdotally about there have been some sales out there where people have not seen the property at all, which kind of leads me into this question. I hope that everybody got a chance to see the new on-site preview addendum that the NCAR rolled out this week that allows someone to, I think it's oriented somebody who sees a house and writes a contract for a house that they've only seen virtually. Allows them to put it under contract. It's sort of like a tiered due diligence process where they have a small fee for them to actually make a on-site inspection of the property, and at that point, that's when they pay due diligence fee if they're going to move forward. I want to know if anyone's had any questions or any of those happened to you in the marketplace, and how have you dealt with it? Anybody? Cub, you seen any questions? Any responses?
No, I'm not seeing anything come through.
Okay. Any other questions for our panelists then? Well, I appreciate.
Tom Wilberger had a question. Tom Wilberger had a question about whether we expect there to be a relaxation of the in-person notary requirement. And I touched on that a little bit earlier, but I'll add to that, you know, we are hopeful that it will be in North Carolina. The governor is in favor of it. The governor had the Supreme Court issue an opinion about whether he could do that based on an executive order, and they determined that he could not, that it required the legislature to act. And so there is a lot of pressure for the legislature to do this. So I can't predict it, but I'm hopeful that when they do come back into session, that they'll relax that requirement.
Okay. Any other questions out there that I have failed to see?
Pat, you have a comment coming from John Fletcher.
Okay, John.
Hey there. Am I there?
You're there.
Okay. The on-site preview addendum, I want to talk about that real quick. I had just a little bit to do with that. Please understand that that is only intended for use for the buyer to actually go into the property and see the house. We've already had a situation where someone had a home inspector in during the on-site preview, and that's not the intention. They had not paid the due diligence fee, which is what you have to pay to have the rights to all the due diligence stuff. The on-site preview addendum is a small fee for someone to look at the house. That is its sole intention.
I understand that part of the intention behind that was in those municipalities specifically that don't allow showings of property, but do allow post-contract inspections that allows a buyer to enter in a house, obviously using the guidelines, to look at a house then because they're under contract, or in those cases where in other areas where they were just trying to be cautious. But it definitely helps in those areas where there's no in-person showings allowed, but it does provide for post-contract inspections. Is that correct, John?
That is correct. And it's obviously in this area, it applies to Durham. But again, the big thing is just remember that that is strictly for a buyer to, after they're under contract, to actually get in and see the house. It is not for any other due diligence activities, home inspections, termite inspections, anything like that. That's why it should be a very short time, 1 or 2 days, and not really a whole lot of money.
Okay, super. Other questions or comments out there that I'm not seeing? It's hard with the screen that we have to
Pat,
see over there.
let me see if I can direct this. So we've got one for Tom, and it says, do you expect any changes to notary requirements for closings during the stay-at-home order? For example, can a notary be done via Zoom?
Well, that was the question that I was responding to a minute ago. And I doubt very much it'll be Zoom, but the legislation that has been proposed does allow for notarization if the notary can view it in real-time video, check the identification, and then get the original documents back in their possession to notarize. So if the legislation is passed in its current form, that's an overview of how it would work.
Okay. Any other questions out there?
Yes, Pat, we have one for Allan. It says, is there any way to block showings in Durham on showing time? Seems to see a lot of out of Durham listings still showing up, allowing showings of mostly out of Durham agents.
No, not really. Also, because now we are, if we were to block showings, we would also block the ability for the new virtual type showings, right? So it's very difficult to limit services or functionality or anything like that for a limited geographical area. It's very difficult. And also, and I understand that some agents are not following the orders that are being given. As an MLS, we cannot police all of that, and because we are covering such a like I said, 16 counties now, it makes that aspect of it even harder, even if we wanted to go in and try and control that. So for now, we are not limiting showings in that sense, or the ability to schedule showings in that sense.
And Allan, as a follow-up, the question is, for the 24-hour rule for the MLS, is that from the marketing date?
Yeah, so, and just to clarify, so the rule is 1 business day. And that is from the marketing date. So that's the MLS rule. The NAR Clear Corporation policy, which we are mirroring with this, states that it's from the first day of any type of marketing. The MLS rule says it's within 1 business day of the marketing date as specified on your listing agreement.
So to follow up on that, so you could have a listing that you took today with an effective marketing date of next Friday because you wanted to get the house cleaned up or on the market, and so within 1 day of the marketing date, it would have to be in MLS. But that means that you cannot do any marketing, including signs, during that period of time. Is that correct, Allan?
Yeah, that's right, Pat, and that's important because with this change, the delayed marketing date, as they call it on the listing agreement in Section 10, agents should take advantage of that, right? Because that buys them some time to not only get the property ready, but also for the agent to get the photos taken and all of that stuff. But you're right, it's absolutely key that neither the seller nor the agent or anybody within the agent's firm advertise the listing prior to the delayed marketing date.
Do you see any other questions out there, Cub? If not, we'll wrap this up.
Just the last one, I think, as I saw come through, is to everyone, and it says, do you see us returning to business as usual, or will we be using some of these new practices going forward?
That's the one I was going to answer. I saw Jessica sent that in, and what is business as usual? Obviously, there's going to be huge changes anytime we have an episode like this. I do think that things will eventually return to a new normal, but the only thing I would caution people as we open back up is we're going to be dealing with this virus for at some stage until there's a vaccine. So I would just encourage people to be patient. Really, our industry has gone virtual anyway, except we require the attorney, no pun intended, to do the dirty work and have the paperwork signed. So be patient with the appraisers and the attorneys, because as long as we can do exterior only appraisals, I'm not going to send my appraiser into a house, and would love for my closing attorney to do everything virtually, because they're really the ones that are in harm's way at this time, and that's going to continue until there's a vaccine. So that's the only thing I see that the industry is going to need patience with as we come out of this into a new normal.
Tom, we talked about it briefly earlier. Are you getting requests for drive-up showings? Drive-up closings?
Not too many, but I can't say I haven't done one on the picnic table out in the green, and we've run some seller documents down to the parking garage and had them signed. We basically we listen to what the concerns are of the people that need to come in, and some people are frankly walking in with no masks even today. Yeah. People are afraid to leave their house, so we're just dealing with the clients as we find them, and trying to work with them to do it in a way that they're comfortable with if we can. In terms of going back to normal, I think I really agree with what Robby's point, that it's going to be a long, slow process of moving toward what we used to know as normal. And I've been thinking about our own practices, and there's some real common sense things that we have made, changes that we have made that I don't think we'll ever go back to. I don't know if the handshake is going to come back. That's bigger than our process, but that's just kind of an example of, we just don't know. But we're going to probably try to keep a healthier environment. And as I said before, I feel certain that we're going to move to, more electronic closing processes. That was coming slowly, but I think that'll probably be accelerated in the next couple of years.
Allan, anything new coming down the pike at TMLS that we should be aware of, and how do you think you're be moving forward?
Yeah, so I think, I don't know if there's ever such a thing as going back to normal. I think normal is just going to change, right? And unfortunately, you could say that this whole situation obviously is unfortunate, but it is pushing technology in a new direction, and much faster than we otherwise would have seen. And I think so when we talk about virtual showings, virtual open houses, and that stuff, I think that's going to be here to stay, right? I think that's going to be a legitimate option now. So I foresee that going forward, and not go. Obviously in-person showings and open houses will come back for sure. But now we will have another alternative to that, and that will stick around. So I think we'll just see a different normal.
Well, I want to thank our panelists, Robby Oakes, Allan Nielson, Tom Holt, for joining us today. I just want to say that the market is going to come back. We have an opportunity to own the upsurge when it does come back, and I encourage everybody to be safe, to take advantage of the online training to build your skills, I've learned more about technology myself in the last couple 3 weeks than I thought I would ever know. If an old dog like me can learn that stuff, no telling what will happen in the future. But I want to thank everybody for joining us today, and be safe and wash your hands. Thank you.